Hope I'm okay.
Okay, and you
I
have
started to look at it.
So this-
Track changes.
this has the track changes in a clean copy. So if, I know, Marcia, you weren't here the last
Yeah.
week when we did,
I have a
but
couple of nits, Mike, nothing major.
yeah, so if you, if people.
Wait a minute, don't we have to incorporate?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Barbara, can you hear us?
So, you know, if people want to look over the changes and, you know, in the parts that we already discussed, just to make sure everybody is, you know, that I kind of accurately got what we were going for on those things.
Yeah.
And then I figured we could work off the clean version to going, you know, forward to
Okay.
do the rest of it. The last thing that we were discussing, and I didn't know if we'd arrived at a, you know, a final wording or plan on what we wanted to do with it, was the one about the, you know, the wheeled items, the roller skates and roller blades and all that stuff. I think that's as far as we got, and I didn't have a resolution of that one in my notes. But I don't know if anybody wants to briefly look over the changes, the track changes before that, and see if anyone has
Has picked a couple of nits, Mike.
further.
And I don't think it was picked up in the new one.
Okay.
So let's see, I'm working off my old one here. Yeah, the paragraph that begins, the following are examples.
Yes.
Examples being, forgive me because I haven't had a chance to even look at the new thing. Okay, the third line on the new draft, disruptive behavior that is not covered by this policy. See that?
Okay.
I think we shouldn't say covered by this policy. We
Right.
should say below.
Yeah, there's not, you know,
Of course, it's covered by this policy.
right.
I think what would be here is,
I-
it's not below, it's still within the policy at the discretion of the director.
Mhm.
You see
Yeah.
what I mean?
Okay, I think that,
That is not specifically covered below.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
listed below or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yeah,
I think specifically covered below is good.
yeah, they're listed.
And then because later on we talk about the discretion, but it is under the policy. No, that was my only point.
Yeah, okay, specifically listed below.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go down as far as to the roller skating. And again, these are all, you know, minor things.
Yeah.
Engaging in loud, abusive, in loud conversation, screaming, yelling, or making any of the noises. No, engaging. There's the part about picking fights.
Section 1, fighting or challenging another to a fight.
I think we should say challenging others to a fight because they can challenge a group of people. Others, it's number one.
Yeah.
Okay, others,
That's
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is all minor stuff, Mike, but, you know. Number 2, engaging in loud conversation, screaming, yelling, or making any other noise that disturbs other library users or staff. Let me know when you're up to what you were up to before I got here.
no, that's good.
Staff. Gambling. Yeah, and you picked that one up, right? Number 7, I think was carrying weapons.
Yeah,
Is that number 7 now?
Yep.
Carrying any weapon, on library premises, yeah, I like that, including local restriction to the fullest extent.
We said we were gonna look into that.
Oh, I'm going to.
We did, we have that answer.
Yeah, pick that up.
Right.
Damaging or theft of, or stealing, instead of theft, of library or patron or staff property.
okay,
I said these are really minor.
yeah, like library patron or staff.
Yeah, let me know what you're up to, where you were before.
We're not there yet.
Okay. Number 9 is, where's the smelly part? Having bodily hygiene or possessions belonging, there are such a strong odor that would impede the use of the library, as including heavily applied perfumes, lotions, hygiene products.
Yeah.
As a feminist, I would like to add the word cologne.
All right. I think that would be covered, but we can list that
No,
out.
some people cologne in that same.
If you say so. Perfumes.
Do you use cologne or perfume?
I do not.
Okay, you use cologne at front, not for.
That's,
Let me know if
I
I'm,
have no issue with including.
I know, and consuming food or drink, where is that one? Okay,
18 now.
okay, and that damages. Blood recovery impacts the ability of other purchasers, like all food debris and trash is the responsibility of the patron who brings it into the library. And I was gonna add something about and should be properly disposed of. We have garbage cans here. I mean, if they want to
Yeah.
throw it out at the library, fine, but if there isn't a library.
So I mean, we could rephrase it and say.
Yeah.
All food debris and trash must be disposed of by the patron who brings it into the library,
Yeah,
something like that. Does
well,
that work?
properly disposed of.
Must be. Does that work? All food debris and trash must be properly disposed of.
And I just, all
By
food debris and
patron.
trash is the responsibility of the patron who brings it into the library and must be properly disposed of. I was gonna add that. to
Yeah, I mean, we could do, I just,
You can do it
I
any way you
feel,
want.
yeah, I was just thinking to kind of keep it simple, like, then we don't have to say responsibility. We already said you must, you know, like, that person must just properly dispose of it. What do people think? Is that?
Yeah, yeah.
For trash. Although, I don't know.
Well, the person, if they don't just discard their own trash.
So,
What
Yeah.
about them?
okay, and my last thing was in a paragraph that began, notwithstanding the foregoing, oh, here you go, I see this. Reasonable accommodation to maybe made for legitimate medical pay. Notwithstanding the foregoing provisions, any person may without prejudice, be neither expelled from the library.
We're not there yet, I don't think.
Oh, okay, so then.
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's the current number 19, I think, is where we have to start
okay,
talking about. So things, I wondered, I know we discussed this last week. I don't know if we got to a resolution on it, but one possible thing, and because just to recap Marcia on a little, like, you know, we say like bicycles or things, we say, you know, bring it, we say you're using them on library property, but obviously people are allowed to ride onto the library property and park their bike here and come in, you know, we have a bike rack and, you know, it's like, that's not what we're trying to do here. And, I asked about the shopping carts because the rest of them are kind of like vehicle type things, like
Right,
things
right.
people ride around in. Shopping carts, I guess there was a specific concern about someone who was kind of leaving a shopping cart on the premises overnight, like kind of storing it here potentially. So maybe if we broke this up and just, you know, kept it as bringing roller skates, rollerblades, et cetera, into the library. So have that period there. And then a second piece to it that says, you know, I mean, it could be the same sentence or whatever, bring them into the library or leaving such items on the premises overnight.
That would work.
that's
And
good.
then that kind of takes care of that, but you know, it makes clear, you know,
Yeah.
we're not gonna complain if you
That's
come,
fine.
you know, if somebody comes, riding up on their bike, obviously that's, you know, totally acceptable and that's, you know. Right.
Or on a skateboard, they could ride their skateboard here, I guess.
Yeah, well, here it says bringing those in, obviously we don't want them riding them in.
No, but they could, you know,
What
like,
are you gonna do with this? I mean, you gotta, like,
I don't know.
So-
it's not a skateboard rack.
Okay, but this is interesting, because are we saying that they can't bring, let's assume a kid comes in with roller skates over their shoulder. Are we gonna prohibit that?
So in terms of, that's what I was gonna say, in terms of enforcement, the roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards, as long as they weren't using them, because, right, we don't have a skateboard rack, so they'd have to keep it with them.
Right.
The only ones where we would have a problem with them bringing them in and not using them is bicycles and shopping carts, because those are disruptive to getting through the library.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's a
Clean way to.
clean way to say it, you know.
Using?
Yeah, but we do want to, like, we don't want people wheeling bicycles into it, so for bicycles,
Well, using would be.
I guess, yeah. I mean, if you bring a bicycle in, you're still kind of rolling the
You
bicycle.
could say using or carrying, but that means somebody can't walk in
Or
with skates.
using them in the building,
Mhm.
because we want to distinguish the building from the actual parking lot. I mean, they can,
Yeah, so,
Well, that's a different issue, right?
Would it make sense to pull out So if we say using roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards, or similar items in the library building,
Mhm.
bicycles must be properly stored outside the library. Like we could. Because
What about the
bicycles,
shopping cart thing?
yeah, well, the bicycles are the only thing that we, like, if they brought them on the property, we have a way for them to store them. Shopping carts, I feel like we almost need to lift
Then you
out.
can say using roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards, bicycle, shopping carts inside the library.
Mhm.
Bicycles must be stored in their whatever designated bicycle
We have bike rack.
area,
Mhm.
period.
And may not,
And then the rest would say no items should be left on library
Premises
property
overnight.
overnight. And 3 sentences.
All right.
So
third-
using
okay.
roller skates, rollerblades, skate shoes, skateboards, bicycle. Shopping
Similar
carts
items in
inside the
the
library,
library.
period. And then bicycles should be stored in the designated like rack.
Mhm.
which is outside,
Right.
and may not be left on the premises overnight.
And then, but you have to say, no items, no such items should be left on.
Right, yeah, I was gonna make another separate
Yeah,
paragraph, a
like-
separate sentence.
A separate sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No such items
Should be left on,
may be
yeah, maybe left, that's fine.
left on library premises overnight.
You know, there's a lady I see sometimes in the library who has a dog, it looks like a service dog, and she has a shopping cart.
Yep, yeah, she hasn't been around since I think last fall.
No, I saw her.
What's the point?
She was-
All the time.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
It's the same woman, okay.
yeah, so, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, you know what, this is yours to enforce.
Right.
So,
The dog's a different challenge.
you're the director, Pete.
No, then it's, yeah.
All right, so we'll see how that goes up. Okay,
Mike, I have a question.
yes,
Are we saying that they can then use skateboards like in the parking lot or?
well, again, that's something then,
We're not saying that. I think we're not addressing that because you do have the farmer's market here in the summer, if we're still having that, which I'm assuming they are. And some people might come with bikes, rollerblade, roller skates.
With skateboards.
On.
I mean, do you think that we should be prohibiting the use of these outside?
I don't think so.
I don't either. I'm just trying to clarify Barbara's point.
yeah, I mean, I guess, I don't, as far as I know, I don't think we've ever had a problem with that, right? With people using the parking lot here as like a,
Skate park. No.
yeah. So maybe it's not worth worrying about that when it hasn't been.
I mean, the only issue that this would really rise for me would be a liability issue.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
But
you're
I
speaking
can't-
of risks in a parking lot, people know the risks of that.
I wasn't suggesting we do anything about it.
And I think the other question with people using it as a skating park would be addressed in the loitering. I thought we had a loitering one.
I think we took loitering out because we had loitering or sleeping and we
That's
were
the whole
saying
point
what
of
is
it.
loitering, so,
We took sleeping animals.
no, we left sleeping. So we're not, yeah,
When it comes to enforcement, like if someone was skating in the parking lot at midnight, we're probably not gonna come down here and enforce it.
Or if they're up there
Right, but
at
if,
night.
but if they're skating here when the library's open, we would be like, hey, you're being disruptive, people parking.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Barbara, what was your point, though? I don't want to dismiss what you were saying.
Did that capture your question, Barbara?
Yes,
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think we would.
For
Okay.
Petitioning.
yeah, so moving on to number 20. So I guess my only question is, are there any like events or uses of meeting rooms or things in the library where these activities would be permissible or acceptable? Or are these like, is there things that people might,
So typically soliciting and sales is prohibited, can't do that. Electioneering and petitioning and campaigning, can't do that, that's a whole different set of laws. The only ones I could see coming up are specifically of this list is interviewing and survey taking, but I don't know if any of that we actually actively do.
Well, we have a policy about the use of the room, so somebody wants to refresh my memory.
But that's the next one that's coming up, that's mine.
Oh.
Yeah, I guess,
Somebody picks the room and wants to interview.
That's what I
that,
was
that,
thinking.
yeah, I
too.
don't know that it's an issue, I just wanted to think it through
Yeah.
before, we, you know,
Yeah.
is there, you know, are there certain types of, you know, I just want to draw the policy in such a way that there's things that people reasonably would do, you know, have some sort of event or thing that they're reserving a room for that kind of technically is in violation because
Yeah.
they're, you know.
Mhm.
Like speed friending.
Speed friending, that's,
Like what?
Quote unquote interviewing. They had an activity called speed friending.
Oh, 5 minutes, to be too.
Yeah.
yeah.
So when people, question, when people reserve a room, do we ask them what they're reserving it for?
So they have to fill out information about like what's the, because they're all public for the most part, they have to fill out like what they'd be telling the public they're doing. And they have to acknowledge that they've read our meeting room policy and that they fall within its guidelines. We do look at them to be like, because sometimes we get like, you know, the cat donation folks who are like, oh, people should, you know, get cats while they're here. And we're like, no, you can't do that, you know? So occasionally you get things like that where they don't read the policy.
I guess is it, and maybe it's fine the way it is. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. Would it make sense to have a thing, you know, something tacked on the end of that that said, you know, except, you know, skip, you know, except, you know, for scheduled events when, you know, or, you know,
Without prior approval.
yeah, or except, you know, with the exception of approved, you know, scheduled events or things.
I think it just is.
Leave it as it is. Yeah.
Because there's something else in here, the reasonable accommodations being made for legitimate and other extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
So like in theory, if the town of Guilderland said, hey, we want to solicit feedback on our master plan in your library, that might be a survey. We might make an exception for that. And we don't want like random people in the parking lot, just, hi, do you have a minute to take a survey?
Yeah. And, you know, this is yours to enforce.
Oh, yeah.
What about 20 and 21? Oh, both contain the word soliciting.
Yeah, I was looking at those two before that. I think soliciting is redundant, and I don't know if it makes sense to merge panhandling into 20.
I'd support that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That work, yeah, I think that works. Let's move panhandling.
After sales.
Soliciting sales, panhandling or similar. So you're
Yeah.
gonna- okay.
Mhm.
Where's 21?
Yep.
Yeah, I have a hearing issue, so.
All right.
The number 22, so sounds in a louder volume than the general noise level. That's a little bit redundant with number 2, which is about loud conversations.
Yeah.
But the point that the staff cared about was sub bullet A, that we wanted to make sure people were being mindful of their devices.
Well, then I guess the question is, do we need the part that's on 22, right? The, like, not subparagraph A, but the, you know, this, because maybe maybe we could replace this whole entry just with something that says, you know, something about, you know, sound from devices, including laptops, smartphones, without, you know,
Yep.
use of earphones or something like that.
It could be to make it grammatically cohesive,
Yeah.
be something like use of devices or use of equipment with sound such as laptops and smartphones without earphones.
Right.
Although,
What do we think of that?
no, I just have a question. Using smartphones without earphones, like, I think that's counterintuitive because if I put my earphones on to talk on the phone, I'm gonna be screaming to use my Bluetooth. So I don't know if that's just captures exactly what we're
I
doing.
don't have earphones, I don't know how to use them on my smart.
Yeah.
Smartphone.
That is a smartphone. It's more like if I think the phone conversation will be more covered by number 2 because it's engaging in a loud conversation.
Yeah.
This is more if they're watching YouTube video at top volume
Hmm.
on their phone.
So do we move bullet A as a separate sentence to number 2?
I think so.
Which is just say all Equipment with sound such as that does not always be used with your measure not to serve other patrons.
Mhm.
That would make sense.
Okay, so just have that be like
That second sentence.
second sentence under number 2.
Yeah.
Do you need that those should not disturb other patrons? Because in a sense, it's covered in 2 already.
Yeah, I think we'd reword it to be, all equipment with sound such as laptops and smartphones must be used with earphones.
Yeah, period. That's fine.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we're taking action not to serve other patrons.
Yeah, yeah.
Because then I'd have to add instead.
Nope.
No, but we are keeping
Right.
the disturbs our
We are
library
keeping
users
that.
in number 2. So
Yeah,
we
which
would
you
add
already,
staff,
yeah,
more staff.
that was already,
So yes,
Then instead.
yeah.
so, okay, so that works. So we'll move that up as a second sentence of the number 2. That works.
Bring animals into the library. The areas of subsistence animals to the ADA. That sentence makes sense.
I mean, the phrasing is a little weird. It comes from our old policy that according to the ADA is a weird way to say it. I
Yeah,
would say
yeah, yeah.
like service animals permitted under the ADA and something like that.
Yeah. Right. Bring animals.
The dogs that we read to are those service animals.
Yes, they fall under that definition.
Love those. The kids read to one of them. They were so happy about it.
Is a service animal the same as a comfort animal?
I don't know the distinction.
There's a distinction.
Yeah.
Service animal or, yeah, I think you're right. It's,
We could check that. We could make the exception as it's a library program again, but yeah, it's.
Because this is a patron policy. This isn't necessarily governing what the library does. This is governing what patrons do.
yeah, no, I'm okay with that.
Bring animals to library initiative steps. We could always add service or comfort animals.
I'm nervous with comfort animals because those are not regulated. So somebody could
They're
just,
not regulated? I thought they were.
so,
Oh, okay.
I don't know, are you talking about like,
There are people who have what's called comfort animals. They're not service animals, like a service animal for a blind person, for instance.
right,
It's a bona fide defined thing. A comfort animal, a lot of kids at college have comfort animals.
do they have a certificate for them?
I'm sorry,
Do they have a certificate or for
I
them?
honestly do not know.
Often they'll get like some sort of,
They get a waiver to come to school.
they'll usually get some kind of doctor's thing saying this person needs this to, for anxiety
For
or this or
anxiety.
whatever. Whether they count as a necessary accommodation under the ADA is an area that's of a lot of
I mean, I don't want
controversy.
to open the door so everybody's bringing a dog in here.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
No, I agree.
because, well, it became a huge deal on airlines because people kept bringing all different kinds of animals onto
Instead of
airlines and
about
saying,
something
I need this for, I have anxiety when I fly, I need this when I do it. And the airlines kind of eventually got sick of dealing with it. And recently a bunch of airlines, I don't know if it's all of them or a bunch of airlines put in policies saying basically, if this isn't like a official service animal, you can't bring it on. We're not going to do it. And as far as I know, there hasn't been any successful lawsuits.
The airline said if it's a service animal, you can't bring it on the plane.
No, unless it's a service.
Unless, yeah.
Right? To say all the people trying to bring on just all kinds of various things and saying, oh, it's my comfort, I need it for, emotional support or whatever.
Right.
They've said, well, it's not an official service animal, we're not going to do it. And as far as I know, it's not like I'm tracking this or anything, but I haven't heard anything about any successful challenges to the airline saying you have to let me bring this
Why
on.
don't we leave service as it is?
So
Because we have prefatory
Leave it as
here,
service
which
animal.
gives the library director
Yeah.
enforce the policy as necessary. So if you find somebody who says, I have to have my cat with me at all times, it's nonsense, throw them out.
Yeah.
It's meow, meow.
We got staff members who are allergic, so we do.
All right. So if we're good with that, then we're on to 24, moving furniture in such a way that disrupts library operations or impacts the ability of others to use the library. Seems fine to me. Anybody else? Using any library resource, including its public access computers, Wi-Fi network, to engage in illegal activity, which violates this policy, or to injure or harass another. So,
This is also covered by our computer use policy. So it's unique for this policy, but it's redundant when the two policies are side by side. But this was a recommendation from our IT manager.
I I would just maybe change the phrasing slightly because this says engage in illegal activity which violates.
This policy.
Yeah.
Get out.
We could just say engage in illegal activity or to injure, or if we want to keep that in, we could have engage in illegal activity or activity which violates this policy or to injure, if we wanted to keep that in. I don't know if it's necessary to have,
It doesn't feel.
since if it already violates the policy, then it violates the policy.
Yeah.
So maybe we just say.
Yeah, illegal activity.
Take away which violates
Violates,
this
yeah.
policy
All right, that works with that.
or harass another person.
Okay. And then failing to follow directions or instructions given by library staff. All right,
Yeah, the new language I like.
all right, so, so we've gone over the whole list. Just checking the time, I know we have a hard stop at 6:15, is that right?
I don't anymore.
Oh, you don't anymore, okay.
Well, it'd still be nice to keep in mind.
We can try. So, I've, we said that this is not an exhaustive list. These are representative examples. But, is there anything else that we can think of that needs to go on this list that we haven't covered that we can think of? Yeah, I don't have anything. Okay. So then the remaining paragraphs, that the first sentence is the new sentence that I added in after our discussion last week
Yeah.
about reasonable accommodation.
Yeah. I have, okay.
Then
Then
we-
we tack that to the front of the notwithstanding.
Yeah.
I just have a comment on the notwithstanding.
Okay.
The last sentence, those who are willing to leave, who do not leave within a reasonable amount of time have to be instructed to do so by the staff. May be subject to, I think we got this backwards, may be subject to removal. Right, and prosecution should follow the removal.
Just change the order.
Yeah.
To
That's it.
removal or prosecution.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
I had one with, we did.
Now,
What about this, if a patron creates a public nuisance or violates any policy set forth herein?
We're
That
waiting.
doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
If a patron, the third sentence of that paragraph. If a
Where are
patron,
you?
in that reasonable accommodation paragraph, the third sentence that starts with if a patron.
so further down in that, the big all capitals section, that's
Mhm.
next, that has these tiered punishments, first offense, second offense, whatever, so, so I don't know, I just want to make sure whatever we say up in this paragraph, is that consistent with what we said down below?
Yeah, I think it is. Well, it doesn't mention privileges, remove.
The paragraph that begins the library board and exclude,
Yeah,
okay. The library board may exclude from the use of the library. I think we have to put in here the concept of withholding library privileges and then define withholding library privileges. Is that,
Well, I think we were here, that third sentence that I was mentioning, you can mention it there. If a patron creates a public nuisance or violates, and I don't like this language, violates any policy set forth herein, this is the entire policy. So what other policies are you talking about?
or violates this policy.
This policy, that patron may be restricted from library or, that patron's privileges may be restricted, right? Because what does this say under number 1? It says library privileges may be revoked. Second, library privileges may be filled for up to a year. So maybe
So now this
there.
defines library privileges as, says library privileges is defined as meaning an individual may not use the library or enter upon library property. Yeah. Does that include, for example, like digital services?
No, we in fact explicitly tell people if we have to ban them, that they can continue to use electronic resources.
which I guess if the concern is, them doing things on the premises, then, it makes sense that that's what the consequence is, I suppose.
What I'm suggesting is withholding of library privileges be put up top at the beginning of this paragraph. So
Okay.
the library board may exclude from the use of the library, and withholding library privileges from. Because
Well,
it should be.
I think if a patron creates a public nuisance or violates this policy, that patron may be admonished or sanctioned as described herein, period. Because you're being repetitive with this stuff.
So, here's a question. Why do we say the library board here? It's a board policy, but we say the library board. It's really, because we say below, such exclusion shall occur on the orders of the director or the director's designee. So it's really the director's exclusion. So I might just get rid of that second sentence, this such exclusion, and change the first sentence so it says the director or director's designee may exclude from use of the library. Right?
And I think you have to have the concept and withhold library privileges from.
I think we're talking about different paragraphs altogether. You're at.
I think I
I'm
see
not.
what you're saying. I think there might be some reordering.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay. But the concept, we define withholding library privilege, we don't say under what circumstances that will happen. So.
Right. Here's what I think. I think after we have our numbered list of specific things, I think we immediately want to have that reasonable accommodation. Right. Now, the next thing that's notwithstanding, that I think probably comes later at the end, because that's just saying, because it's not just notwithstanding this list of things, it's also notwithstanding the standard penalties and things. It's saying, look, if you're causing a danger to people wherever, we're going to remove you immediately. So maybe that was the end. Notwithstanding all of this, if there's an immediate danger or whatever, if your presence, causes an imminent danger, we're going to remove you immediately.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I might move that later.
I'm cool with that,
Now, okay, so I think we start with the reasonable accommodation line.
right?
Then we may say, so I guess there's a little bit of redundancy between the sentence that starts with the patron creates a public nuisance or violates this policy, and the later part where it says about we may exclude from the library any person who violates the policy. That's there's some redundancy.
Right.
There. So I guess what's the way we want to?
Yeah, well, I don't know where you wrote it, but I was in the library, I took that board.
Yeah.
They exclude from use of the library, and withhold library privileges
I think you
and
should
handle persons.
I just think you should say may be sanctioned as described herein. And then you go to the tier thing. So you don't.
I think these can be collapsed.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
I see what you're saying there, and I think that might be a good way to handle this. So
And then-
maybe we say, so instead of this line where we say the library board may exclude from use, we say the director or the director's designee may impose whatever you want to call it, consequences or, for violation of this policy as, described below, and then we give
Sure.
these.
Yeah, but I think you got to get the concept of withholding library privileges in a paragraph that you define what that is.
Right,
That's
so,
the point. So I think you could say the library may exclude from use of the library or withhold library privileges any and all persons who shall willfully violate this policy. Such exclusion from the library shall occur, blah, 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 in this document withholding library privileges. You follow where I'm coming from? Because you kind of throw a library privilege out there.
yeah, I'm just trying to figure out
You follow what I'm saying?
yeah.
So let's see how we could consolidate this.
Do you want this one back?
So, Marcia, what I'm hearing is, so if that paragraph that begins currently the library board, so the library director or their designee may exclude from the use of the library or withhold library privileges
Correct.
any and all persons who shall willfully violate this policy.
Yeah.
then we could take out that second sentence.
Right.
And then say, in this document, withholding of library privileges is defined as meaning that an individual may not use the library or enter library property.
Right.
The end of the paragraph.
Yeah.
We would move that up to after reasonable accommodations.
So,
The other item I think we should move is there's a sentence that behavior prohibited by federal, state, or local law. We could move that after 26 because it's just things that you're not allowed to do.
okay. Where just,
It's a separate paragraph above the
do
library
we
board.
make that another bulleted number, so make that number 27 on the list or whatever number?
Yeah, we're
just
just
say,
saying.
You know, behaving in a manner prohibited by federal,
Yes.
state, or local law.
Yeah,
That just is our kind of illegal catch-all. at the
Yes.
end. Behaving in a manner prohibited by federal, state, or local law.
And I think the new language, reasonable accommodations to the foregoing restrictions, blah, 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 should stand by itself. That's a different concept than throwing people out.
Yeah, so that's fine. So, okay, so here's what I got so far.
Right.
We have our numbered list. The last item on the list will be that behaving in a manner prohibited by federal, state, or local law on the premises of the library. And so that'll come up under 26. Then we'll have the line about reasonable accommodations. Reasonable accommodations by itself. So we've got that.
Then we can consolidate the other
Then,
paragraphs.
right, then I think we come down to this one that's currently the bottom paragraph on this page.
The library may exclude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exclude from the use, how do we want to,
you said it before, the library board may exclude from the use of the library or withhold library privileges.
any and all persons who shall willfully violate.
Who
this
any?
policy. So it's exclusion.
Or for any and all purposes, or persons who shall.
Yeah, and this document withholding is defined as meaning, okay? Persons who violate
okay,
first offense.
so may exclude from the use of the library or withhold
Library
privileges.
privileges.
or to any,
Or any and all persons
Yeah.
who shall willfully violate this policy.
So the question is, do we need the notwithstanding language?
I
yeah, we
think-
left that in.
We
Well,
did.
yeah, we want to put that at the very end because that's the.
Okay, if you want to put it at the end, that's fine.
Yeah, 'cause
But I
that's-
leave the new language, but it's got the stand up.
Yeah.
Concept that's different.
Okay, so let me get rid of this. Do we need something that says the director or the director's designee, or do we not even need that?
we don't need that, I think,
Because
because
it's
it's,
did that. Yeah. So we'll just say the library may exclude from the use of the library or withhold library privileges from any and all persons who shall willfully violate the policy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then in this document, withholding of library privileges is defined as meaning, it's a little awkwardly worded, but.
Yeah.
Withholding of library privileges.
We read this definition from the old.
I believe it's from the old one, because I think these last couple paragraphs weren't changed.
Oh, this is awkward because it doesn't include digital.
We let them use their digital,
So they may not use the library.
but they can't come on the physical premises.
Yeah.
Well, then it's not, may not use the
Yeah, may
library.
not, yeah, they can
It
still
may
use
not
the library,
enter
not enter the
the
library
library
property.
or use its physical materials.
That would work.
It's defined as an individual's being prohibited from entering the library or
Using any property therein, something like that.
physical materials. I think that's why I would do it.
Where did we get these arbitrary 6 month, 1 year?
Those were in the old policy.
Those were, yeah, they were in the old one, and, yeah,
Pretty arbitrary to me.
I'm not sure where they came from originally.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're maximums, it's up to. So I guess just the question is. Do we think they're reasonable? I mean,
So what we've run into is typically if somebody does something that's really bad, like stealing,
Yeah,
they've usually violated the policy multiple times, and then we just stack the offenses. We say, you stole from us, that's violation 1, you damaged our property, it's violation 2.
What we say is determined by the library director, it's arbitrary.
Right. We do need some sort of enforcement language in there because we don't want to be accused of, someone gets off lightly for any reason.
so let me go back. So withholding library privileges, and then we say, okay. First offense, second offense, and then I may rephrase the further offenses and just
Is
say
it our subject or maybe,
further, like, I would say,
or
what?
the persons who violate this policy are subject or maybe subject?
Maybe subject, because that gets into the general catch-all language again.
Yeah, I mean, they both say may be revoked for up to,
Mhm.
so I think,
Or are.
any lesser consequence would be,
Hmm.
included in that as well. I don't know.
Because typically if someone's doing a light infraction, we just try to do it as a conversation, say, hey, try again tomorrow, like you gotta go home today.
First offense language may be revoked.
I still have a question when you're ready about where to fit in the notwithstanding and
Yeah.
where to
Yeah.
fit in those are willing to leave, or who do not leave within a reasonable
All right.
time.
How about this for we have first offense, second offense, how about, then we say consequences for further offenses are at the discretion of the director. All right, and then, so I would say immediately after that piece there with where we've said the consequences, revoking the thing, all that stuff, then we can say,
Notwithstanding.
yeah, then we can do the notwithstanding.
Right,
And then right after that, we say those who are unwilling to leave or do not leave within a reasonable time may be subject to removal or prosecution.
yeah, I like it, that says reordering the context.
But I do have a question, if we don't ever mention why we would ask someone to leave, do we? Those who are unwilling to leave, like, what is that relating to? Where does it say that we can ask them to leave?
Well, I think if you've been, do we need to, I mean, because if we're withholding someone's library privileges for up to, however much time, that means you're not allowed to be on the premises, right?
Yeah, that's typically when it would go into effect. Somebody violates the policy, we say, you have to go home for the day. They say, make me.
The concept under the notwithstanding really is a situation where somebody is an immediate threat.
Mhm.
So,
But the first offense wouldn't be revoked. It would just be, can you please leave the library? Wouldn't that be the first thing you need to do? And then if they say no, then you say that, you can call the police or whatever. I just don't know that.
Here's a question. In our practice, when you've had situations where you have revoked somebody's privilege, so you inform somebody your library privilege has been revoked for the next 6 months or for whatever, do you formally trespass them? Or do you just tell,
We just ask them to leave.
You just
If
ask
they
them
come
to leave.
back, it's a formal trespass.
Okay.
So if we're able to hand deliver the notice to them,
yeah,
then we've never had to call the police to have someone removed yet. But yeah, we delivered the notice and we asked them to leave.
Okay.
If they return, we would formally trespass.
so let me go back.
But say they violate this policy from any of the 1 through 27 that we just discussed. Your initial thing is not, get out of here, you're suspended for 6 months.
Correct.
It's, can you please leave or refrain from doing what you're doing? And so they might just leave. At that point, you wouldn't consider that first offense, or would you consider that first
Well,
offense?
so, I mean, here's, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but suppose you had a situation, somebody does something, egregious, they're tearing up books or doing something like that, right? So you go up to them, you say, you need to leave immediately, you know, you're violating our policies, whatever. The person's like, fine, I'll go, and they leave. And then you're also gonna write it up or whatever and say, this person is now banned from the premises for this period of time.
But if
And
somebody.
then the next time they show up, you hand it to them and say, I'm sorry, you can't go back in here, right? So, you know, the immediate thing just to deal with the problem as it's happening, as it's occurring is get out of here.
Where does it say that?
Well, that's the thing. Maybe we need
There's
to
no saying- there's no
clarify.
preface to those who are unwilling to leave. I think you should say something like, people who are found violating the policy, like this, those were, where was it?
Are you in the notwithstanding language?
No, like right after the last one, that would be 27, behaving in a manner prohibited by law, blah, blah, blah.
Let me, how about this, right? In the paragraph before our numbered list, we have this line that says,
In the event of disruptive behavior, that line?
yeah, and maybe, well, that's the one that says for things that are not under the policy, but that says the library director. How about this? What if we change that sentence? So right now it says in the event of disruptive behavior that is not, and we're gonna say specifically listed below, right? What about,
In the event of disruptive behavior
In the-
or other behavior not covered.
how about in the event of violations of this policy, comma, including disruptive behavior that is not specifically listed below, the library director or their designee may enforce this policy to the extent necessary.
Yeah, but it may be the listed below.
Right. So that's why I was trying to include
Yeah,
that as
yeah.
well. But may enforce this policy to the extent necessary, comma, including immediate removal from the premises.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody didn't put their earbuds in,
We're not gonna throw them out.
you go over and say, hey, you know, it's a policy of the library that you need to be quiet because it's disruptive. Most people will say, I'm awfully sorry. I'll turn the sound off, I'll stick the earbuds in my ear, and that'll be the end of that.
Yeah.
We're talking about somebody who, you know, rampages through the library or does stuff that really represents imminent danger.
I don't know that that's the case. Sometimes,
Well, you're not gonna throw somebody out if they,
no, I agree. I just wasn't sure that I agree that most things are very overt. Some things are very like just annoying little things. Not everybody's gonna explode in the library. People are just gonna be annoying because they're assholes, like talk on speakerphone, like, hey, dude, what's going on?
Or you say, can you please turn it off? You say,
Right.
no,
Right.
you can't tell me what to do. So after a minute and a half of that, you say you need to leave.
Yeah, and really it is about like, we talked about this at the last meeting, the policy, we're trying to write in a way that helps the staff to enforce it
Yeah.
and to exercise that discretion, so that if they're like, I told the cell phone guy to knock it off and he didn't, then it's like, okay, go to the policy.
Yeah.
So if you're changing them like to,
Here's my thought right now. In the event of violation of this policy, including disruptive behavior that is not specifically listed below, the library director or the designee may enforce this policy. I'm sort of inserted into the sentences I'm trying to figure.
to the extent necessary to ensure the safety of patrons and staff and the ability of public office for a period, this might include asking, this may include asking the offending patron to leave.
Yeah, this may include, this may include removal from the premises. or something.
I think you can take your language.
Right.
You could add
And
another,
the patron to vacate the premises, period. Those who are unwilling to leave or who do not leave within a reasonable time, and that's when you go to.
you can say,
Yeah.
the director may,
I could go there.
without prior, you know, you can use the language of the notwithstanding. Well, I try to notice that if the behavior is so outrageous that it does present a threat, then the person will be asked to leave. In other words, pick up the language and the notwithstanding and add it into that paragraph, because that's probably where.
But that's separate. If they
Yeah, so-
see a danger, that is, I agree that they should have that authority to immediately kick them out. I'm just talking about prefacing that language that says at least maybe called if they refuse to leave with first asking them to leave. And then if they refuse, going to that police sentence. So I think what Mike had drafted in that paragraph was fine. And then
Yeah, so-
period,
Okay, so how does this, we start with this one, in the event of violation of this policy, including disruptive behavior is not specifically listed below, the library director of the designated may enforce this policy to the extent necessary, and the rest of that sentence. Then we say, this may include removal from the premises. Then we include, then we put in the one about, those who are unwilling to leave and not leave within a reasonable amount of time if you're instructed, that goes with that. Then we have our list of all the things. Then after that, we have our reasonable accommodation piece. Then we have the thing about the library may exclude from the use of the library any, persons who willfully violate this, and their definition of what that means, and this list of consequences. And then after that, we say, notwithstanding or provision, any person may be immediately expelled if their presence constitutes the danger to society.
and then you have the appeals process.
And then we'll have the appeals process.
Okay, I don't love it, but you guys love it, fine.
Well-
To me, I'd like to put the list of prohibited acts first and then the consequences after. The second paragraph says you're gonna be thrown out of the library for subject to prosecution before you even get to the list of the things that you can, either listed or other similar things. You know what I'm saying?
So I see what you're saying, and we could actually move that in the event paragraph as amended by you just now.
Yeah, move that below.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So first we just have the introduction.
right.
so where would that go?
Would go after the reasonable
I think,
accommodations.
Yes. Yep, I was thinking that.
Say that
too.
again?
It would go after the reasonable accommodations line.
Well, I think it needs to be a new paragraph.
Yes,
It could be, yeah. Barbara's in agreement.
I think this all works. My notes are a little, I think I'm.
You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like,
So
you can't
that,
tell me what I can't do.
no, I agree
tell
with
me
that.
what to do.
I agree with that. So that third paragraph of the first page ends in prohibited under this policy, period. And then you go into the numbered paragraphs. After 26, we have behaving in a manner prohibited by federal law.
Right,
Then you have reasonable accommodations to the foregoing restriction.
and the standalone.
Yes. Then you have, in the event of disruptive behavior that is not covered by this policy, et cetera,
Mhm.
adding the language about those who are unwilling to leave, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the library may exclude.
Yeah,
Right.
and then we have the consequences.
Right.
And
Then we have
then
removal,
then we
then
have,
the
then we
prosecution.
have the notwithstanding,
Right.
and then we go into the appeals process.
That's-
So my only thing that I didn't get is did we just, and I know there was a suggestion, but I didn't get the wording. The
Right.
definition of withholding of library privileges.
Yeah, it's defined as being prohibited from entering the library or using its physical material. That was my suggestion.
Is it defined as meaning that an individual may not use the library?
No, not
Change.
defined as being prohibited from entering the library or using its physical materials. Because that is what they would ask you, not to enter the.
So that means digital is not covered by that.
Correct.
Yep, and that's actually it's a nice thing to offer people when they get frustrated, say you can still use ebooks.
All right, so now let's look at the appeals
don't
process.
even have-
Just see, is there anything?
Well, they can't really harm the digital. I mean, I guess they could.
Can you prohibit the digital?
When we could, but that would be a whole kettle of
We
fish.
did AI to this. So are we looking at appeal process at this point?
Yeah,
Versus this library? Okay. Yeah. okay. Versus this library.
I would just say, instead of pursuant to the above rules, I would just say pursuant to this policy.
Yeah.
Trustees.
And that includes stuff that's not even on the list. They appeal to them. So they have to appeal to us?
Yeah.
Person, oh my God.
Do we really want to include the next special meeting? as opposed to the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, because if
Because
we hold a special meeting for
Special
budget,
meeting, we usually have a reason for the special meeting and we don't have to deal with like extraneous. like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would
that's,
just say
that's a term of art in the bylaws, you know.
the next regularly scheduled board meeting.
Yes, you're regular.
Yeah, if they're stupid enough to violate the policy, then they don't deserve special meeting. Must be at the next board meeting. You have to mail them the notice,
We do.
that include email?
I could, if we have their email address on file, if they're,
We
if
can
they,
ask them as with phone mail.
So are we saying that if they appear at a later meeting, that they've blown the appeal process because they didn't appear at the next very
That's what it
next
seems to be
meeting?
saying.
I don't know that that's the case. They should have,
If they're going to appeal, they should appeal immediately.
yeah, I think, especially if we ban somebody for 2 months and then they go like, oh, I'm not gonna, I'll appeal it next month or whatever. Like, we want them to have a sense of urgency that if they have a legitimate reason or a legitimate counter to this, then they should be able to provide it immediately.
Well, I don't have the bylaws with me, but I mean, if something with that urgent, I think 3 board members could call a special meeting or something like that. I don't have the bylaws. We could always call one if you feel that it's really important to hear such a person. I don't know if special meeting is defined as to who could call it. I'm not sure it's defined as to what it should be about.
Yeah.
And so the concept here is somebody will come to the board meeting, plead their case, and then we go into executive session and we tell them when. Oh, 10
You
days.
respond in 10 days.
I think we should be clear about that, because to me it wasn't clear. The board shall hear the appeal during the executive session and respond. And make a determination, right? In writing within the next 10 days.
So
Or otherwise respond. I mean, I guess you could say you
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah.
decided.
Hear the appeal during executive session and, make a determination
Or otherwise respond, because maybe we'll say we haven't decided yet.
That is a response. Because it might end up being a situation where in the executive session, you hear them, and you can't make a determination because we have to talk to legal counsel.
Right.
So this is the last resort.
Mhm.
The board's decision on appeal is the last resort for this person.
Correct. You are the check to the director's decision.
And then they can go out and sue us for Article 78.
Yeah.
No ideas, Marcia. As long as our
You know.
decision is not arbitrary and capricious, I think.
Here's the question. Do we streamline this paragraph slightly because we have they may appeal to the library board of trustees by appearing in person during the next regularly scheduled board meeting. And then we say the appearance must be at the next board meeting. What if we just combine that during the next regularly scheduled board meeting following the receipt of the
Yes.
libraries and just
Yeah.
and just combine those two sentences. Following receipt of the library's mailing.
Yep.
Anyway, well, that's an administrative exhaustion requirement. If they,
Yeah.
miss the next board meeting and don't show up, then we can,
And if they
deny them the
work.
basis of failure to exhaust their.
I mean, listen, if somebody were sick and couldn't show up, obviously, we have to be somewhat flexible.
Yeah,
Well,
humans.
Do they have to appear in person?
They do.
But there's,
You're in jail.
Don't laugh, that happened.
they can argue that the administrative. The administrative procedure that we offered to them was not available to them, was not actually available to them, and then that's an exception that gets around it. That's what happens usually in prison cases,
Yeah.
where somebody gets beat up in the prison and they're in the infirmary and then they missed the deadline to file their grievance. And they say, well, I was, in a coma, so I couldn't file it. And they say, okay, fine.
That's very
But that's the
specific.
court, isn't that the court of claims?
I've
though?
seen that very,
Isn't that court of claims though?
what's that?
The prison rights are under court of claims.
It depends what,
Yeah.
the nature of it. Because a lot of times those are coming up in federal court as a 1983.
1985, yeah, violations. of-
Yeah. It's usually federal.
I think it's seared in our brain.
I know, it's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Really. I just picked up growing
It's
papers.
6:30,
and
we're
I just-
deadline.
I just got my law review paper on law of jurisdiction, written longhand.
Okay. I'm gonna make a motion that the committee will move for the adoption of this policy as just agreed on here at next week's board meeting. Or do I have a second?
A second.
Marcia second.
Oh, sure, that's, I say aye.
Aye.
All in favor, yeah,
Aye.
Aye.
right? Motion to adjourn,
Second.
okay,
Second,
all right.
Like,
When are we discussing
Adjourn.
the
Me too.
behavior policy?
Okay.
No, I'm just asking a question.
hey, Mike,
Yeah,
just remember, we combined 22 with 2, so that additional one won't be an advanced number. It would probably.
yeah, the numbering,
You'll figure out the number.
Right.
that'll work out when everything gets moved.
Okay, I wasn't here, but when are we discussing this statement that you sent her?
I believe at the next board meeting. I
Innocence already?
think so. I think Alicia.
Oh, yeah, you're not gonna discuss part of it.
Right, and I don't know, Alicia said like send feedback. I took down the one note you gave me, Marcia, but
Yeah, that-
I don't think we can send feedback over on email.
We can't, that was my,
I'm not going to.
we cannot
My
do that.
follow-up, so like, I don't know if you can do that, but that's what she'd
We
asked.
can't
for.
conduct business library board business by email,
Right,
even though everybody did that.
so I believe the discussion is at the next meeting.
Okay. And my only comment is.
That's one of those frustrating, it's a little bit of a gray area, exactly what you can and can't do, because we're not,
Well,
because,
I can assure you, if one person says do this and the other person says, well, I think that would.
yeah, we don't want to get into a big bad,
Because this is,
and it's,
it's
and
an open,
anything,
it's an open meeting.
Yeah.
Public
Yeah.
policy.
if it's kind of seeking to kind of build consensus or whatever, then we're not supposed to do that.
Right.
And I know Barbara still has questions about, being in person and giving your address. Barbara?
Oh, what are you referring to?
You've always raised the issue about not being able to have a meeting unless there are people physically present and having to give your address and all that other stuff. Or am I
Oh,
mis-
yeah. I guess my feelings on that are very well known, that if you
Yeah, that-
want to come forward, you
Yeah.
should identify yourself. You don't have to give your public address, but at least identify
know,
yourself.
You're at the Caymans, I would flout that.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Okay, so
Oh,
this
good.
is-
Well done, enjoy, Barbara.
Oh, thank you. Marcia, how is your shoulder coming?
Marina drove me here and she's taking me home, but it's much better. I don't have the cast on.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
So are you able to use your hand a little bit?
Somewhat. Eating is nothing I do in a restaurant, I'll tell you that.
Everything down.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for asking.
I took, it's,
I'll be home next week.
just have to,
See you, Barbara.
I'll try and.
See you later.
Tomorrow, so I
You
can
can
send
try that, I guess.
with the board packet. I gotta do minutes for this meeting in our last committee meeting.